Here now with Alex Van Beek, the founder of Van Beek Natural Science. Alex, thanks for taking the time to join us today. Right off the bat, can you explain why fresh food is so crucial, so critical in swine nutrition, and what some key points are for producers that they should focus on to maintain that feed quality?
Yeah, sure. So, as every producer knows, production is all about the amount of energy you can get in the animal and the amount of energy that's available to them. So, the freshness of the food is important because if you have a high bacteria load or a high CFU count, that is already consuming the food. It's already consuming energy parts. You also have the minute that the animal consumes a feed with high CFU counts, high colony forming units in the feed, you may not smell them. You may not see it, but they're there. So producers need to test their feed on a frequent basis to understand what they're actually feeding. When an animal takes in that high colony forming unit load, it's also taxing on their immune system. So it's incredibly important to know that you're getting fresh feed. And even if you do have a high colony forming unit in the feed, what can you do about it?
On the heels of hearing you talk about that, how should swine diets be adjusted, if they should be at all, based on maybe different stages of life of the pigs? I'm talking about maybe specific nutrients, maybe feed formulations.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. You know, a a pregnant animal is going to need much different compounds, much different uh, diet than a growing newborn, whether it's a piglet or calf, but let's say piglet right now, and versus one that you're trying to fatten up and finish. So in each one of these life stages, you can alter the compounds they're getting by feed additives, and you can actually control some of the components in their life that are critical at that moment. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them would be when a sow is about to farrow, it's absolutely important to have certain compounds that we include in some of the IntegraVix uh, uh, products that we offer, that we can elevate their IgG levels in the colostrum. That's highly important. In fact, we can double them, get close to doubling them. It's highly important because those are the antibodies they pass over now to that piglet. So that's one example of a life stage. The other one is in that piglet, the predominant factor that you're starting with is development of the GI tract, because it is the digestive tract that they're going to gain the energy out of their feed from. And that is set up early in life. You don't really change that factor later in life. It's set up earlier. So there are certain pieces that we can put into, which is in IntegraVix nursery, that goes into the diet to help set them up for optimized feed efficiency and energy gain. And then you have finisher, which is all about feed efficiency. At that point, you're trying to get the most feed efficient production you can in that animal. So each life stage requires different approaches.
All right, you talk about the feed efficiency, talking to feed optimization. I'm curious, what are some key metrics to maybe look at beyond the normal feed conversation that's taking place amongst producers?
Sure. Well, one of this ties both water and feed. So anytime you're talking about feeding an animal and anytime you're talking about dry matter intake or feed intake, you also have to look at water intake. And those are directly correlating with each other. So if you see a drop in water intake, guaranteed you're going to see a drop in feed intake. Anytime you're dealing with traveling stresses or not traveling, movement. So you're going from the sow unit after farrowing and you're bringing them to the nursery. And in that stress, they're going with a new group of pigs. There's always a social stress accommodated there. Anytime you have those challenges that come up, feed intake drops. Well, there's a way you can approach that by ensuring that water intake immediately at the start is elevated. The second that happens, you're going to have pigs wanting to eat more. And so, in some of those, just understanding, yeah, it has to do with fresh feed, but it also has to do with appetite. And if you can create an opportunity for healthy water intake, you will create a larger appetite. And that's crucial for optimizing that growing early on in life. So for every pound I can gain earlier on in life will pay dividends at the end.
We see a lot of things happening with technology. Clearly, Alex, it's evolving almost every day. So, how can producers, reassess what they're doing to make sure that they're evolving with the times?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question uh, because we so often get so caught up with what we're doing from a day-to-day basis that we forget to just stop and look at what's going on in the markets around us. In you go to some of the trade shows and there's some amazing technologies that are coming out that help optimize and gain some of those efficiencies that we just talked about. And so I always recommend, stay on top of what's going on. Read the news on, don't get consumed with the news. We can often do that also, but read the news and read what's happening in the industry. Stay on top of what's going on as far as trends and some of these things. You got some interesting trends that are happening in the industry right now, and especially with regulations. So you have to stay informed, and it's not just the news, but it's also industry partners like ourselves, um, veterinarians that you're working with, nutritionists that you're working with. Stay in touch with your industry partners to learn from them. They all have something to give.
Finally, Alex, I wanted to ask you, what are some innovative solutions for producers as they move forward after hearing some of the advice that you've given them today, maybe to improve whatever they possibly can when it comes to swine nutrition?
Sure. I think the first thing that you want to consider is, how do you keep a sow unit clean or as clean as possible? So, how do you prepare early on? The growth for that little piglet already starts with the mother. It already starts with the sow. That's where everything starts. Now, when you start talking about the nurseries and the finishing units, um, what is your water? What's contained there? You don't want high levels of chlorine. You don't want high levels of iron, and there's other elements to consider. The pH of the water is also something to consider. So measuring the water and testing the water for pH and water quality. And the other is to take frequent tests on your feed. You have to know what you're feeding also if you want to stay ahead and competitive in this landscape.
Alex Van Beek, the founder of Van Beek Natural Sciences, we're thankful for your time and really thoughtful, great perspective on what's happening. Look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Appreciate it, Vic. Thanks a bunch.